صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. All praise in perfection is for Allah Almighty, the creator of the universes. May peace and salutations be upon the liege Lord of all messengers, the mercy to all mankind, the beloved of Allah, the light and lantern of our hearts and life, our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And may peace and blessings be upon his family, his kinship, his noble companions and all those who tread in his footsteps. Alhamdulillah, once again we join in our central masjid Qurayl Eve in the blessed month of Ramadan, wanting to learn about the life of the Barzakh, which we alhamdulillah spoke about last week in part 1. And alhamdulillah, I see you brothers mashallah return for part 2. Alhamdulillah, I am sure that you enjoyed last week, you learned a lot, and inshallah this week we together pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes this gathering of ours blessed for us. Every moment we spend in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala learning the noble deen, may Allah make it a source of reward for us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding of deen and make us sincere seekers of the true path. Last week, as you are aware, we spoke about particularly the life of the interspace, which we mentioned was from the point when one passes away till the day of resurrection. When one is placed in the grave, we call this the life of the Barzakh, life of the Barzakh. And we went into certain hadiths looking at certain aspects of the life in the grave. I dealt with a number of questions, and inshallah this week I would like to carry on with the hadith of Barzakh ibn Azib radiyallahu anhu, which I partially quoted last week, regarding the narrative or the event of the death of a believer. What happens when somebody passes away? In that hadith, before I go into that hadith, last week, the beginning part of my talk, I focused on the fact that a dead body doesn't enter a space of absence. It doesn't become like a stone. It doesn't become adam mahaz, ma'doom mahal in the Arabic language. It doesn't mean that it's completely finished now. It's completely annihilated when it dies. The human body isn't completely annihilated. We mentioned there is faculty of understanding in the dead body, faculty of speaking in the dead body, faculty of hearing in the dead body. And I gave several ahadiths, about 7 hadiths I quoted in 7 different events, mentioning on different occasions the Prophet ﷺ telling us about the state of the dead bodies and what happens to them. If you focus inshallah you will learn a lot more this week as well. And I mentioned that there is unanimous consensus of early Muslims, complete agreement among the early Muslims, that the human body actually has a faculty of understanding, and it has some sort of life. And I mentioned that the soul doesn't fully re-enter the body in the grave, but it has an attachment with the body. It's like the attachment of the relation of the sun with the earth. I gave this example. This is an example Imam Suyuti gave and other scholars gave as well. They said it's like the sun, which is away from the earth, but it's still a source of life for the trees. You see, it's giving life to the trees even though it's away from earth. The soul is away from the body, but it still has a relation with the human body inside the grave. And it's that relation that enables and allows the dead body to actually see the angels and answer the questions, comprehend the questions and answer the questions. And it is that body then is given na'im or adab, it's given the bliss or the glad tidings and the reward inside the grave, or punishment of the grave. If that dead body is like a stone, like jamad, if it's completely senseless, what's the point of having the questioning in the grave? It wouldn't mean anything. What's the point of having reward in the grave or punishment in the grave if the human body or the human corpse is like a senseless or sensationless piece of item, for example, like a stone, for example. So these things are clearly indicative of the point, or to the point that the human being doesn't become nothing. He doesn't turn into he's not annihilated. He doesn't become just dust and decomposes without sensation. No. The ulama have mentioned in several of their works, including Imam Jalaluddin as-Suyuti, including Imam al-Qurtubi, both of them in their relatives' works, known as At-Tadhkirah, the reminder. The reminder, two great works. Also Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, one of the great imams of the Wahhabiyya, Salafiyya, in his book called Ar-Ruh, the soul. All of these three scholars clearly mention that what is death? Death doesn't mean that you die and then there's nothing after that. That isn't death. There's no adam mahd, there's no complete absence after death. What is death? Intiqal min dar ila dar. It's being transported from one place to another, but you still exist in a different form, in a different state. Okay? And we talked about these things last week, and I'm just summing up what I said last week. I want to particularly mention one great contribution on this particular topic by the great subcontinent Imam who passed away in 1921, the Common Era, and 1340 Hijrah. The Imam Ahmad Rida Khan, alhamdulillah, whose annual demise we celebrate, his great legacy and work, alhamdulillah, in this masjid. Imam Ahmad Rida Khan, who is the great Imam of the Ahlul Sunnah and the Sunni Creed in the subcontinent, he wrote this particular book called Hayatul Mawat fi Bayan Sama'i al-Amwat in 1305. This work, basically, a question came to him at his office of fatwa in Bareilly, where he was situated. A question came to him asking him about the view of the Muslims regarding the dead body. Does the dead body have the faculty to understand, to hear, to reply, to speak? He wrote this book offering 60 hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ on the topic. He collected all the major references with all the sources talking about the chains of the hadith and the authenticity of the hadiths, marking clearly that these are reliable and authentic hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, which he named in this book, Hayatul Mawat fi Bayan Sama'i al-Amwat, living life of the dead in exposition or in explaining the hearing power of the deceased people. And he mentioned particularly because the opponents who actually denied this, I mentioned that the early Muslims agreed this, but later on there were denominations among the Muslims. Among them were the anti-madhabists, the people who didn't follow any of the four schools. They are known as the Ahl Hadith or the Ghayr Muqallids. And they had a strong position, and even some of the Deobandis also. They had a strong position, particularly the Ahl Hadith, the Ghayr Muqallids, the anti-madhabists. They don't follow any of the four schools. They are not Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki or Hanbali. And according to the fatwa of the later ulama, if you're not within any of the four schools, you are out of the fold of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. You are out of the saved community. You are out of the community of the Prophet ﷺ, for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, and the Prophet ﷺ has promised success on the Day of Judgment. That's the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. You have to be within the four schools to actually be within the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So the anti-madhabists, this group, they have their doctrinal differences as well as fiqh differences. And one of their doctrinal aqidah differences was, among the many other differences they had, major differences, one of them was that the dead body doesn't have the faculty of understanding. And it doesn't have the faculty of listening and so forth. To the extent that some of them went to the extent of even denying the questioning or the understanding in the grave. Even the adhab of the grave, for example. They even went to deny that there's no form of adhab in the grave. Because if the human body can't feel anything, there's no point of having a adhab in the grave. So they went to that extent of denial. And this question came to him regarding particularly that sect or that belief. And Imam Ahmad Rida Khan, he raised 35 objections to their position. The first chapter is about 35 objections to those people who believe that human bodies don't have sensation. Now if I was to go through this book, it's weeks of lectures. Okay, 35 objections to that view. That the human body doesn't have the faculty of understanding or hearing. He raised 35 objections to that view. Okay? Then in the second chapter, he mentioned 60 ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, very clearly explaining to us that the human bodies have a form of understanding. And he went through the chains and the sources. In the third chapter, he quoted 200 statements of the early Muslims. 200 by name with references. 200 statements of the Sahaba, of their students and their students, all unanimously in agreement that, all concurring on this view, that the dead body actually has a faculty of hearing, responding, speaking, and a sort of life in the grave. And then he finished this off by presenting 105 statements from the books of Shah Waliullah Muhaddis al-Hilmi. Because the Ahli Hadith also say we belong to the tradition of Shah Waliullah. So Imam Ahmad Rida Khan said, well, hang on. Shah Waliullah is also my grand teacher. And this is his view. He presented 105 statements, aqwal of Shah Waliullah Muhaddis al-Hilmi, in this book, saying that if you own the view and the creed of Shah Waliullah, who is known as Kawkab al-Diyar al-Hindiya, he was the major hadith scholar of the Indian subcontinent. Even the Arab scholars, alhamdulillah, in my travels over the Middle East, when I speak to Arab scholars and I sit in their gatherings, they take pride in mentioning Shah Waliullah as their great-grand teacher. They actually, even Shaykh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, in several of his gatherings when we were with him in Syria, when we were studying hadith with him, with great pride they would mention Shah Waliullah as their teacher, their great-grand teacher. Shah Waliullah is the grand teacher of Imam Ahmad Rida Khan also. And Imam Ahmad Rida Khan presented 105 statements from Shah Waliullah Muhaddis al-Dehlawi and from his family, also illustrating that they also have this view. So if anyone claims to hail, to belong to the tradition of a legacy of Shah Waliullah, like Diban is also claimed, and the Ahl Hadith also claim, that this is the view of Shah Waliullah also. And the beautiful thing is that Imam Ahmad Rida Khan's way of explaining things is amazing. Whenever he presents his view about something, he supports it by the Quran first. Then 60 ahadith, 200 statements of the early Muslims, 105 statements of the later ulama from one family, and then at the end of presenting 1400 years of tradition, saying this is what the majority of Muslims have always believed. At the end of it, he says this is also the view of Ahmad Rida. This is how he presented tradition, and this is how he defended his positions. And this book, I wanted to mention it because it's a valuable work, even though we can't go into the details of this book. It requires time. But I want to go into the hadith of Barzakh, which I promised to look at, inshallah. I partially mentioned it last week, and I want to continue mentioning it this week. Barzakh ibn Azim radiyallahu anhu, say radiyallahu anhu. A blessed companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who mentioned this hadith of the noble Prophet, who related this hadith of the noble Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, one of the four Imams and a great hadith scholar, also a mujaddid of the Ahlul Sunnah in his time, from the predecessors. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal recorded this hadith in his Musnad. It's a sound hadith. Imam Qurtubi mentioned, all the scholars mentioned it's a sound hadith. When the human being is placed into the grave, we mentioned there's a process of the grave. And then there is a questioning of the grave. And the questioning of the grave is called fitnatul qabr, the tribulation of the grave. If you see the word in Arabic, fitnatul qabr, it means the questioning of the grave. Okay, it means the hisab of the grave. This is what it refers to, fitnatul qabr. Now, before going into that, I want to first mention there are some exceptions. There are certain people who are not questioned in the grave. There are certain categories of people that are not questioned in the grave. The Anbiya, the Rasul, the Anbiya and Prophet, they're not questioned by the angels in the grave. Because they were sent to as a guidance for people. You see, they went to make da'wah, they went out to bring people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the way of the Lord, of the universes. So they don't ask the questions in the graves. The angels don't come up to them to ask questions. Also, we are told that the martyrs, the shuhada, those who actually physically are fighting in the battlefield, like the early Sahaba who passed away in the Battle of Uhud, for example, or in Karbala, the tragedy of Imam Hussein and his family, for example, the Ahlul Bayt in Muharram, for example, or the early shuhada who passed away in battles, who are known as the shuhada, the martyrs, There are traditions telling us that they are also not questioned in the grave. A shaheed does not have fitnatul qabr. A shaheed does not have the questioning of the grave. And look, this blessing of Allah also extends not to prophets, not just to shuhada, it extends as well to the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. There are certain people who are not questioned in the grave. Somebody who dies on Thursday night is not questioned. We're told in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, somebody who passes away on Thursday night is not questioned. Because of the blessings of the day after. Because of the blessings of Jumu'ah on Friday. We're also told that somebody who passes away on Friday, he's not questioned in the grave. And subhanAllah, there's a hadith about the month of Ramadan. Whoever passes away in the month of Ramadan is not questioned in the grave. In the entire month of Ramadan, there is no fitna of the qabr, as we are told in the hadith of the noble Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. So these are exceptions, and these people don't have questioning in the grave. This is out of the rahmah and mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in the month of Ramadan. And it's matchless. The Prophet ﷺ, speaking in the hadith of Barzakh, within that context now, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, what happens? The angels will come to the deceased body, to the Muslim, if he is a Muslim, they will make him sit. You see, who sits? A dead body sits? A dead body that doesn't feel anything? So the hadith is clearly telling us in the Musnad of Ahmad, and also in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that you will get up in your grave like you get up after you wake up. To answer the questions, you're seated in the grave. Okay, to answer the questions. And more will be the question. The first question they will ask is, who is your Lord? Man Rabbuka? And if he's a believer, he will say, Rabbi Allah. My Lord is Allah. Then they will ask him, well, what is your religion? Ma dinuka? And he will answer, Dini al-Islam. My religion is Islam. And then they should ask him, who is this man who was sent to you? And the image of the Prophet ﷺ will be presented before him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And they will ask him, and there are different wordings here that relate to this third question. ما كنت تقول في حق هذا الرجل وما تقول في هذا الرجل. What did you used to say about this person? To this person. And everybody's going to have that question in the grave. And it's going to be in the direct form. What did you used to say about this person? And that's interesting. The Prophet ﷺ will be shown in the grave, and I'm going to talk about how that happens. And then the person will reply, and if he's a believer, he will say, Huwa Rasulullah. He's a messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. One of the poets in Urdu beautifully said this, and I love the Urdu language. It's very poetic, its odyssey is beautiful, its rhythm is nice, its meanings are emotional. He said in the Urdu language, Qabr mein sarkar aaye, to main qadmon mein giru. Farishte aakar mujhe uthaye, to main unse yun kahun. पाए नाज से ऐ फरिश्तों मैं क्यों उठूं मर के पहुंचा हूं यहां इस दिल रुबा के वास्ते. When I lie in my grave, this poet says, when I lie in my grave and the noble Prophet ﷺ, he is shown to me, his beautiful vision is given to me, then I will fall into the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that will be the reply to all of my questions. I will fall into the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the angels will ask me to get up. He's explaining his attachment or his love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the excitement and the anticipation that he wants to go to the grave to meet the noble Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in this verse. So he says, when I fall into the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they will pick me up and they will say, get up, oh man. And he will say, why should I get up? I have died in order to see this person. I died to see him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now I have reached him. Why should I detach from him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? This is poetic, but it's an emotional attachment that the poet has with the noble Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it's beautiful because it also reflects our love and it stimulates our love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So they will ask him this question and he will say, Huwa Rasulullah, he is the noble messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now there is a question here. Will the Prophet ﷺ's soul go to every grave? Will his body go to every grave? Or what will happen? Or will an image be shown to us of the Prophet ﷺ? There is a variety of opinions of the ulama on this. Okay? In Sahih al-Bukhari we are told, مَا كُنْتَ تَقُولُ فِي حَقِّ هَذَا الرَّجُلُ مَا تَقُولُ فِي هَذَا الرَّجُلُ. What did you used to say about this person? Now هذا Okay? هذا is اسم الإشارة, the demonstrative pronoun in the Arabic language, which is used for something that is actually visible in front of you. That is محسوس and مبصر. هذا is for اسم الإشارة, for محسوس and مبصر. It's something that can be touched and also can be seen. You say هذا, this. You say this, this. What did you used to say about this person? The pronoun this, even in the English language, is used for something that has form, that is visible and can be touched. You say this masjid, this minaret, this pulpit, this musalla, this imam, this person. So the demonstrative pronoun this is going to be used in the grave. And that's what's mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari and all of the other narrations. Now the question is, what are the opinions of the ulama? Some of the ulama mention that what will actually happen is the soul of the Prophet ﷺ will travel. That's one of the views. One of the views of the ulama is that the Prophet ﷺ will remain in his noble grave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove all of the veils, all of the distances between the grave of that person and the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all of the distances will be removed like they were removed on the night of Miraj. When the distance was made short for him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These distances will be removed, the veil will be removed, and the person will actually see the Prophet ﷺ as if he is inside his grave, but Rasulullah will still be inside his tomb in Medina. So Tayyibah. You see how the veil will be removed, and that's one of the views of the ulama. Now, is that possible? Yes, it's possible. Don't we have that hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, where the king of Abyssinia, Najashi, radiyallahu anhu, who became a Sahabi, who became a mu'min in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Najashi, the king of Abyssinia, when he passed away, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he stood in Medina and prayed his janazah. In Medina, whilst the king was in Abyssinia, in Ethiopia. Now the ulama mentioned in the commentary of this hadith of Sahih Bukhari, including Imam Badruddin al-Aini, the commentator, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, these are the commentaries that explain the hadith of Sahih Bukhari. They say in the commentary, in explaining this hadith, underneath the hadith, they say that what actually happened? The Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. The dead body of Najashi is in Abyssinia. How is the Prophet ﷺ praying the janazah? And one of the views that they relate to us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed all of the veils, all of the distances. And the janazah of Najashi was as if it is before Rasulullah and he prayed his janazah like that. This is in Sahih Bukhari and its commentaries. Okay? So if that can happen in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, it can also happen after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ. That's one of the views. Now I want to focus on another thing now. Another thing that I want to focus on is, look at the questioning of the grave. There are three basic questions. مَا رَبُّكَ مَا دِينُكَ مَا تَقُولُ فِي هَذَا الرَّجُلِ. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? And what do you say about this person? The first thing I want you to ponder on is the following point. The first question is, who is your Lord? It's about who is it. The second question is, what? The third question is what? What did you used to say about him? Now look at this clear distinction. The first question isn't, what did you used to say about Allah? That's not the first question. What's the first question? Who is your Lord? The second question isn't, what did you say about Islam? The second question is what? What is your faith? What is your religion? And look at the third question. It's clearly different, isn't it? The manner, the style in which the third question is presented is clearly different. In Sahih Bukhari and Muslim Ahmad, in all of the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, we have this variation where the question is completely different. What did you used to say about him? Allahu Akbar. So what we say about the Prophet today, the views we hold about him ﷺ, are going to matter in the grave. Because we're going to be asked about them. The manner in which we speak about him ﷺ. What did you used to say about him? How clear can it get? It's so clear. About Allah, it's not what did you used to say about Allah? No. Who is your Lord? Then what is your religion? Okay? So what we say about, what views we hold about the person of the Prophet ﷺ today actually matter. Because salvation in the grave depends upon that third question. This is the point I want to make. When is somebody saved in the grave? When is somebody saved? When does somebody pass the exam of the grave? Tell me. Is it when he passes the first question? Is he saved now? Is he protected now from the tribulations of the grave? Is he guaranteed Al-Jannah now? He's not, is he? Why? There's still a need to find out. Okay, he says, my Lord is Allah. I believe in the existence of God, for example. Okay, now we need to find out which Allah you believe in. Which God you believe in? The God of Judaism, the God of Christianity, the God of which faith? Of Sikhism? So the second question arises. Okay, then you believe in God? Now tell us which God? To which religion does he belong? So the second question comes up. Okay, then tell us which faith then. Ma dinuka, what's your religion? You see? So the first question is still begging for another question. Okay, you believe in God, but which God? Of which religion? So the second question comes up. The religion of Islam. Another point I want to make very, very clearly and boldly, and it's complete common sense if you pay attention. What the Muslim says to the second question, in reply to the second question, when he says, Dini al-Islam, my religion is Islam. He's believed in Allah, he's also confessed that he follows the faith of the religion of Islam. Tell me, does there remain a need for a third question if he's a Muslim? I want you to think about something. Does there remain a need for a third question? Does there? Well, if you have this view that being Muslim is enough, saying Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah is enough, having deen as Islam is enough, praying your salah is enough, giving your zakah is enough, right? If you think following Islam is enough, then there would be no need of a third question, because then the angels would say, okay then, second question over and done with, you're a Muslim, you're in this category. But the Muslim is of different kinds. And the angels want to know now, which category of Muslims does he belong to? So after they have found out that he is a Muslim, now there arises a question to find out, was he a real Muslim? And how did they do that? They want to know what he used to say about the Prophet ﷺ. So what did he used to say about him? About him ﷺ? So salvation doesn't depend on just Islam. The point I want to make, being a Muslim is not enough. Having the right aqidah about Rasulullah is important. That is what will differentiate between the right and wrong in the grave. And that's why there's a need for a third question in the grave. Otherwise, if Islam is enough, there would be no need for a third question. So you understand the beauty of the arrangement of the three questions. And having the right doctrine about the person of the Prophet ﷺ is important in this dunya. And that's reflected through the three questions that we have in the grave. Being a Muslim is not enough. Having the right aqidah of the Prophet about the Prophet ﷺ, the right doctrine about him ﷺ, salvation depends upon that in the grave. It's when you pass the third question that you are saved. You pass through the exam of the grave. And this is why this is interesting. In Sahih al-Bukhari, when Imam al-Bukhari narrates the hadith about the questioning of the grave, he doesn't mention the first two questions. He just mentions the third one in the narration. And it makes you think that Imam Bukhari doesn't mention the first two questions. Why? He just mentions the third question in Bukhari. He's illustrating the fact that salvation is not on the first question. Salvation is not on the second question. Salvation is on the third question. The importance of the third question out of all three questions is the Prophet ﷺ. So it shows the centrality of Rasulullah in Iman, the centrality of Rasulullah in our faith, the centrality of Rasulullah ﷺ in our aqidah, the centrality of Rasulullah in our Iman, the centrality of Rasulullah ﷺ in our ihsan, the centrality of Rasulullah ﷺ, the one who showed us the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who taught us our Lord is Allah, who taught us our deen is Islam, who taught us that we are Muslims, it is He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who taught you Dini al-Islam? Who taught you Ma Rabbuka, Rabbi Allah? Who taught you these questions and the answers? It was the person of the Prophet ﷺ. So perfectly salvation depends upon the third question. And it reflects the questioning of the grave, reflects the centrality of Rasulullah ﷺ in our aqidah and iman, in our belief system. The noble Prophet ﷺ's centrality we have also spoken about, alhamdulillah. And it's common sense if you think about the three questions. Then after the person replies and he says he is the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the angels will then ask him, they shall ask him, from where do you know that? How do you know he is the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? And then the deceased person will say, I read the book of Allah. I read the Kitabullah, I read the book of Allah, I believed in it and I accepted it. Therefore I know he is a messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then what will happen? A caller will call from the sky. And the caller will say, my slave has spoken the truth. My slave has spoken the truth. So spread out for him from paradise and clothe him from paradise and open a door for him from paradise. So there is a spread put out in his grave which he rests on. A bedding of the grave. And then the door of Jannah is open for him because he is successful in answering the questions. And then its goodness and scent of paradise, the scent will increase in the grave. It will come into the grave of the deceased person. It will reach him. And then his grave will, the Prophet said, his grave will then increase and extend for him. And it will expand it for him as far as he can see. After he passes the question, then his grave is open for him. And this can be very relative. The relativity theory of Einstein, if you know it. This can be relative. For him, he might be in a massive room. But he might be, from us, from our point of view, when we look at his grave, he's next to another grave. See? So to him, he feels he is a massive area. But for us, we feel he's next to another grave. This is the relativity theory that Einstein came up with when he spoke about zero mass. When something with zero mass travels at the speed of light, what did he say, Einstein? Einstein said when something travels with zero mass at the speed, like a photon for example, if it travels at the speed of light, then he said 1 second for that particle can be like 1,000,000 seconds for it. To us it's 1 second it's traveling, but to that particle that's traveling it's like 1,000,000 seconds. So that 1 second becomes like 1,000,000 seconds for that thing. This is what relativity is. And that happens in the grave. For us, we think that this grave is next to this grave and this grave is next, and there's no room down there. But you have to remember, they are in Barzakh. They're in a state that is not open to our eyes. We can't see their state. We can't physically assess it. We mentioned this. Barzakh is something that cannot be measured or experimented with the apparatus and tools of this dunya. You can't actually physically check the Barzakh if you wanted to do that. Okay? So the grave, for the dead person, relatively, for the dead person, the deceased person actually feels that his grave has been opened for him as far as he can see. So it's massive. The grave of the believer is massive. But for us, when we stand on top of the grave, it seems small. And this is what is mentioned in the Prophet ﷺ's hadith. The grave is expanded for as far as he can see. Now, there's a beautiful point here that I want to mention. In the hadith of Tirmidhi, this is the hadith of Bara that we're still going through. The long hadith. The long hadith. The hadith of Bara, get familiar with that. It's the long hadith about death. Okay? The hadith of Bara, the long hadith about death. We covered some part of it last week and we're finishing it off this week. There's one addition I want to put here from the hadith of Tirmidhi. One of the 6 books of hadith, Sunan al-Tirmidhi, also known as Jami'. Imam al-Tirmidhi mentions that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that when the dead person actually, when he is successful in replying to all of the questions, the angels will say to him, نَمْ كَنَوْمَةِ الْعُرُوسِ Subhanallah. الَّذِي لَا يُوقِظُهُ إِلَّا أَحَبَّ أَهْلِهِ إِلَيْهِ. The angel will say to the dead body, when they lie the dead body down, they say, now sleep like the bride sleeps. Now sleep like the bride sleeps. And none shall wake the bride except her most beloved kinsman. This is what the hadith says in Tirmidhi. None shall wake the bride except the most beloved kinsman. So this hadith is telling us that the bride is happy on her meeting with her beloved. The bride is happy. And this is the excitement. The hadith is trying to tell us the excitement that the dead body will have when they finish the exam. It will be excited. And it will rest like the bride, the Prophet ﷺ told us in this hadith. And the word urs also comes from this hadith. Urs. Urs in Arabic is a marriage. Now, urus is a groom or a bride. And the angel says, sleep like, rest like the bride. And because the awliya of Allah rest like brides in their graves, so when we celebrate their death anniversaries, we call them urs. Because they are in a state of pleasure with their Lord. You see, and they are excited that they are with their Lord and they have gone through the grave successfully, and this is why we call it the Urs, the Urdu word, we call it the Urs, the annual Fatiha that we make for awliya. It comes from this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, sleep or rest like the bride sleeps. Then a man will come to this Muslim who's just passed away, who's been questioned, who has finished his exam. He's excited that he has finished the exam. Now he is in pleasure and in a state of bliss and joy. His grave has been expanded for him. And this happens the day you bury them. It doesn't take time, it doesn't take a year. It happens the day you bury them. Right? It happens the time you bury them. What happens when he lies down? Then a man with a handsome face, a man will go into his grave. In the hadith of Monawwar we are told. He will be wearing nice clothes, he will have a sweet scent. And this handsome looking man will say to the deceased person, he will say, I bring you glad tidings, I give you good news, I give you bashar of that which will make you happy. This is the day that Allah had promised you. This was the day that Allah promised you for being good in the dunya. Allah promised you the reward of the grave. Here is the day now. You're witnessing it, you're seeing it. And then that person will say, then the believer will say, who are you? Your face is of someone who comes with good news. Who are you? I don't know who you are. And the person will say, I am your good deeds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give your good deeds that you have the form of a human being, and He will visit you in your grave. And this happens right after the questioning of the grave, when you are made to lie down again. After you're set up, you're made to lie down again. A spread is put out from Jannah for you. Door of Jannah is open, sun comes in, and somebody handsome comes up to you and says to you that this is the day Allah promised you. Glad tidings for you, good news for you. And you say, who is this? Who are you? I don't recognize you. You're someone who comes with good news. And the person will say, that form will say, I am your good deeds. That they will come to you in the form of a good man. And what happens with the sinful person? The complete opposite. What happens with the sinful person? The kuffar, for example, those who are out of the fold of Islam, for example, what happens to them? The Prophet ﷺ says that to the kuffar what will happen? Two angels will come to them, they will ask them the same questions, same set of 3 questions. Who is your Lord? And they will say, I do not know. And the third question will be, what is your religion? I do not know. And who is this man who was sent to you? And he will say, I do not know. And then a caller from the sky will call again, like the first time it called, my slave has spoken falsely. So spread out for him from hellfire, and open a door for him to hell. So the grave then, so the heat of the hellfire, it comes into the grave, then his grave will be made narrow. Like the grave of the believer is expanded, but the grave of the disbeliever is made narrow, until we are told in this hadith that the rib cage is actually intertwined. It breaks. The rib cage would go each on the other side. Then a man with an ugly face wearing ugly garments, clothes, would come up giving an offensive odor, smelly smell, will come to him, and he will say to him, I bring you tidings of that which will harm you. And this is a very scary moment. It's somebody that you don't recognize who comes up to you in this ugly form. You're completely alone, you don't have solace, you don't have comfort. This person doesn't have his family with him. He is in this small room. He's always been excited in the luxuries of his bedroom. This is the first night he's spending out of his home. Not in the luxury of his bedroom, but in the 6-foot deep grave. And he is visited by this ugly man. And the ugly man asks him, and the ugly man is wishing him evil. And then the disbeliever will say, who are you? Your face is ugly. You're someone who brings ugly news. And then that person will say, I'm your evil deeds. I'm your guna. I'm your sins that you used to do. And here am I. And the sins will have an evil form. They will come in the form of an ugly human being. And one will see his sins and he will be frightened. So we witness our actions in our graves. And if we want to witness good actions in our grave in a good form, then we have to do them in this dunya. We have to prepare for that, so that we actually see a good sight in the grave, and that we are not frightened by an ugly sight. And our amal and our actions are presented to us in the morning and the evening, as the Quran mentions. That your actions will be presented to you ashiyan and ghuduwan, in the morning and the evening. The actions of every human being is presented, they show the actions in the morning. This is what you used to do in the grave. This is what you used to do in the dunya. This is what you used to do. This is how you used to spend your time. This is what you used to do with your friends. This is what you used to do in your privacy. Everything will be shown to you at that point, and then man will have nothing but guilt and nothing but shame and nothing but time that has just been missed and wasted and cannot be recovered. So now is time, and now is time to prepare, and now is time to, the Prophet ﷺ said that take advantage of certain things before certain things come in your life. Take advantage of time before you don't have time. If you're free, then think yourself as being, having advantage over other people. Because there are people out there who are not free. So make good time, good use of time before you are occupied. The Prophet ﷺ said, make good use of your health before you become sick. Make good use of your youth before you become old. And make good use of your life before you pass away. These are 4 things the Prophet ﷺ said. اغتنم أربعا قبل أربعين. Make good use of 4 things before 4 things. And these are beautiful wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, encouraging us that, you know, it will be too late in the grave. It's just gone. And subhanAllah, I'm looking at some of the brothers, and even me, if you look at me, we grew up in this masjid like small kids. SubhanAllah, we used to pray here. We used to sometimes have football in this masjid with some of the brothers, mashallah. We had a brilliant time in this masjid. And now we've all grown up. We've all gone into our walks of life. And when we look back, many of you brothers will agree, right? Some of you brothers I don't even recognize because you've just grown up. Time has gone fast. It's really fast. You know, I remember this masjid and how we grew up in this masjid. We spent a lot of time in this masjid in our youth. A lot of time in this masjid. And I sat around you brothers, mashallah. Many of you were very young. I don't recognize some of you brothers. And I hope you will excuse me, inshallah, and introduce yourselves to me, inshallah. And you won't shy away. But time goes fast. And by the time you know it, my father sometimes speaks about his past and so forth. And you speak to the elderly people and they say, look, youth is gone. It's just gone. We just can't believe it. We can't believe that our youth has finished so quickly. And I also think now that subhanAllah, so much time has gone. Alhamdulillah, I've been occupied with really good things. I don't have remorse. I don't regret any of my time, alhamdulillah. Not a single moment do I regret, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. I mean, because of the blessings of my father, I had a good time. Alhamdulillah, I was in good people, in good societies, doing good things. And I made good use of my time, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. And I'm in good things at the moment. And Allah keep me in good things until I die. And may we all die in a state where we are doing good things. But death can come at any point. It doesn't mean that you will grow old and then you will die. You know, I had friends driving in Sheffield at one point, a few years ago. They were driving on the motorway and they had some silly race on the motorway. They crashed and brothers passed away. Young brothers, 22, 23 years old. Because of motorway speeding. These were good friends. And it was a complete shock when I found out that actually somebody so young, so good looking, and alhamdulillah, quite affluent, wealthy family, good people who looked after themselves, and they had two deaths in the family. So death can come at any point. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to crash into someone. Somebody can crash into you, for example, if you were to take the car scenario. So you're never safe, and you never know the next moment. Anything can happen. And Allah protect us from sudden happenings, and sudden deaths, inshaAllah, and give us long lives of piety and good deeds. But we have to make use of this time, because then we will see our actions in our graves. And they're going to be present whether we like them in the grave or we don't. Right? We're going to be shown morning and evening, the Quran says. Wudu and Ashiyah. Morning, evening. Morning, evening, we'll be shown our deeds. This is what you should do. This is how you occupy your time. It's a moment to reflect and think also. And this is the end I want to mention of the hadith of Bara, the long hadith about death. Narrated by Al-Bara radiallahu anhu. If you remember, this began with one of the Ansar of Medina passing away. The Prophet going to the graveyard, sitting on the ground. The grave wasn't dug up yet. With the Sahaba, they are all silent. Rasulullah is poking the ground with his staff, with his stick. And then he lifts his hand and he says to all of them, say, A'udhu billahi min fitnatil qabr. Say that we seek refuge in Allah from the tribulation of the grave. And then the Prophet went on to mention this hadith. This is the long hadith that I started off last week. And I, alhamdulillah, have completed this particular hadith. There are some aqidah points that I want to clearly make here, which are quite important in fact. And sometimes confused also, so I feel the need of mentioning these particular points. I mentioned last week that the life of the prophets and the shuhada, the life of the martyrs, and the life of the Anbiya, the messengers in their grave, is very distinct, it's very different, it's very real to the life of other human beings in the grave. Okay? And I just want to go through some evidences or through some texts that I brought with me today from hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and just have a look at the kind of texts that we have, the narratives we have from the Prophet ﷺ, talking about the life of the prophets in their graves. The first thing that I want to particularly mention is that there is consensus, there is complete agreement of all of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah ulama of Hadith, the scholars of Hadith. There is complete agreement amongst the scholars of Hadith, the scholars of Aqidah and doctrine, that the Prophets are alive in their graves. Okay? That the Prophets are alive in their graves. And I'm going to mention some quotes of the ulama in this regard. In my hand is a book called Nazm al-Mutanathir fi al-Hadith al-Mutawatir, which is a hadith book collecting the hadiths that are mass narrated. Mass narrated means there's no 1, 2, 3 Sahaba narrating these hadiths. There are loads of them narrating these hadiths. And Imam Muhammad bin Ja'far al-Qahtani, who's buried in Fez, and I visited his grave last year in Fez when I went to Morocco. I was there for 4 days. I visited the grave. This is his book. He collects these hadiths in this particular book. And he says, Ahadithu hayati al-anbiya fi quburihim. He says, all the hadiths that tell us the Prophets are alive in their graves, he said, all of those hadiths are mass narrated. We don't have 1, 2, but we have many ahadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? These are mass narrated. Over the centuries, there are numbers of people, many ulama, sahaba, tabi'un, students who related this to us, that the Prophets are alive in their graves. He mentioned that Imam Suyuti, quotes Imam Suyuti, Jalaluddin Suyuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, who is a scholar of hadith in Egypt in the 9th century Hijrah, according to the Hijrah calendar. He mentioned that, he said, Tawatarat biha al-akhbar. About the Prophets being alive, the hadiths on this are mass. There's no 1, 2 hadiths. You're not talking about, is this chain sound or is it weak? No. We're talking about, there are so many hadiths that they're authentic. There are so many people narrating them, so there's no weakness in these hadiths at all. There's just so many people narrating, there's no question of weakness. There are mutawatir, mass narrated hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ. And Imam Suyuti actually wrote a book called Imba'ul Adhkiya bi Hayat al-Anbiya, informing the intelligent about the life of the Prophets. And he wrote this small book. It's available in his Fatawa, Al-Hawi, Al-Fatawi, and it's also published separately as well, in which he actually presents all the proofs of the Prophets being alive in their graves. Last week we said, remember, there is a sort of life in the grave anyway for the normal believer, right? And even the kafir also, the non-Muslim also understands, also hears, also feels, and these are all signs of life in the Barzakh. Now he says, Imam Suyuti says, Hayatun Nabi fi qabrihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, huwa سائر الأنبياء معلومة عندنا علما قطعيا. We have no doubt about them being alive in their grave. We have علم قطعي, يقيني, جزمي, حتمي. We have certainty in those narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, because we have تواترت بها الأخبار الدالة على ذلك. We have many narrations and reports indicative of this. وقد ألف الإمام البيهقي جزءا في حياة الأنبياء عليهم الصلاة والسلام في قبورهم. And Imam al-Bayhaqi, one of the great Imams of Hadith in his time, he singled out a full book on this topic. And alhamdulillah, I also have that with me also. Then Ibn al-Qayyim, who is considered a great Imam among a certain group, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he has a book called Kitab al-Ruh, which I quoted last week and I also quote now. He mentions from Imam al-Qurtubi, radiyallahu anhu, he said, صح عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن الأرض لا تأكل أجساد الأنبياء. That the earth does not consume the bodies of the Prophets. The bodies of the Prophets don't decompose. And he said, this is Ibn al-Qayyim saying this, al-Jawziyah. And you find him quoted among the Ahl Hadith, غير مقلدين, or the Salafiyya Wahhabi sect particularly. So this is a useful quote actually of his. وأنه, and look at Ibn al-Qayyim continues to say, وأنه صلى الله عليه وسلم اجتمع بالأنبياء ليلة الإسراء في بيت المقدس وفي السماء خصوصا لموسى وقد أخبر بأنه ما من مسلم يسلم عليه إلا رد الله عليه روحه حتى يرد عليه السلام إلى غير ذلك مما يحصل من جملته القطع بأن موت الأنبياء إنما هو راجع إلى أن غيبوا عنا بحيث لا ندركهم وإن كانوا موجودين أحياء وذلك كالحال في الملائكة فإنهم أحياء موجودون ولا نراهم والله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم. Ibn al-Qayyim continues to say, and it's interesting, he said, we know the Prophets are alive because they all gathered with the Prophet on the night of Isra and Mi'raj. They all met with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet saw them praying behind him, right? On the night journey, the Mi'raj journey. And this is all substantial proof to prove that they are alive. And he says, this Ibn al-Qayyim, again quoting, he said that he particularly met Musa and other prophets as well, again in the heavens again. Again in the heavens he met them. And the Prophet ﷺ also said that every time a Muslim gives me salam, every time somebody says Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, somebody invokes greetings upon the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah returns my soul to me and I return his greetings to him. You see, now I'm going to talk about this particular hadith, but I just want to finish off this hadith about the returning of the soul to return the greetings. I'm going to talk about that, but Ibn al-Qayyim says, from all of this, مِمَّا يَحْصُلُ مِنْ جُمْلَتِهِ, in summary, what we learn from all of these hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ and all of these akhbar, what we learn is al-qat'u بِأَنَّ مَوْتَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ, is the certainty, there's no doubt, that the death of the Anbiya, what is it? What does the death of the Anbiya mean? أَنَّهُمْ غُيِّبُوا عَنَّا بِحَيْثِ لَا. What the death of the Anbiya is, they are taken away from our eyes. It doesn't mean they've completely finished. He says, like the angels, they're not in front of us, but they exist, they are living. Besides, when the prophets pass away, like the angels, they are taken away from our eyes, but they still live. This is what Imam Ahmad said, Tu zinda hai banda, tu zinda hai banda, meri chashme alam se chup jaane wale. Oh beloved Prophet ﷺ, I swear by Allah you are alive. I swear by Allah you are alive. Even though you are veiled from my eye, you are veiled from my eye, that's why I can't see you. It doesn't mean I deny your existence, O Rasulullah. This is what Imam al-Qattani mentions, I quoted fully from his text, that's from Mutanasir. Imam Suyuti, Ibn al-Qayyim, al-Jawziyah, and all of the ulama, he mentioned in this particular book. The second thing that I want to mention is the hadith about the soil cannot consume the body of the prophets. And this hadith comes to us from many of the Sahaba, particularly Abu Darda radiallahu anhu and Aus ibn Aus radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with both of them. Ibn Majah and Abu Dawud, two of the 6 books of the canonical works of hadith, Abu Dawud, the major works of hadith, Abu Dawud and Ibn Majah, they make reference to Aus ibn Aus and Abu Darda radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, in one of the narrations, he said, أَكْثِرُوا عَلَيَّ الصَّلَاةَ يَوْمَ الْجُمُعَةِ, increase reciting salat upon me, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, on Fridays. And the Prophet and the Sahaba asked, Arimta, after death, Ya Rasulullah, shall we continue reciting salawat upon you? Will you not decompose? They asked him this very direct question. Will you not decompose? And the Prophet said to the Sahaba, إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ أَن تَأْكُلَ أَجْسَادَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ فَنَبِيُّ اللَّهِ حَيٌّ يُرْزَقُ. He said, Allah has forbidden for the earth to eat or to consume the body of the prophets. This is Abu Dawud and in Ibn Majah also. It's a sound, salih narration. Okay, and it's relied upon, and I mentioned that there's no question about its authenticity. It is qat'i, it is yaqini, there is no doubt they're alive. Because there are so many hadiths on this topic that cannot be ignored. As Imam al-Qattani mentioned in this text. And I mentioned particularly, the Prophet ﷺ said that the bodies cannot be consumed by the earth. فَنَبِيُّ اللَّهِ حَيٌّ يُرْزَقُ. So the Prophet of Allah, Hayyun, is alive. Yurzaq is given rizq in the grave. Is given sustenance in the grave. In one narration, he prays, yusalli, in the grave. And I want to mention here, I have with me 2 other texts that I want to particularly mention. Shaykh Abdul Haq Muhaddis al-Dehlwi rahmatullahi alayhi, who was the towering figure of hadith in the Indian subcontinent. Shaykh Abdul Haq Muhaddis al-Dehlwi. If you hear that name, Shaykh Abdul Haq Muhaddis, well before Imam Ahmad Khan, the great grand teacher of Imam Ahmad Khan. Several 100 years ago, around 300 to 400 years ago, Shaykh Abdul Haq, he studied in Mecca amongst the greatest of the ulama. He had great teachers among the Arabs, and he came to, in the 11th century, he came to India, he lived in Delhi, he taught hadith in Delhi. He is actually the one who began, if you want to say, the study of hadith and deen in the Indian subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. He is the founder. Okay, Abdul Haq Muhaddis al-Dehlwi. Who is Abdul Haq Muhaddis al-Dehlwi? His legacy, who is he? 400 years ago in the Indian subcontinent, i.e. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. It is this personality who brought deen into the country, brought education into the country, brought hadith legacy and tradition into the country after studying many years in the Arab world. Abdul Haq Muhaddis al-Dehlwi rahmatullah alayh, he has several works of hadith and he is widely accepted among the other sects also found in the Indian subcontinent, even though they have clear differences with him, particularly this one. Shaykh Abdul Haq Muhaddis Adeelwi in his Suluku Aqrab al-Subul, he mentions, in Farsi, he says, I'm going to read the Persian text to you, Bachandi ikhtilafato kasrate mazahib, ke dar ulama-e ummat ast, yak kasra dari masla khilafe nes. कि हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम बहकीकत हयात बेशाइबाए मजाज़ो तवहुम तावील दाइमो बाक़ियन व बरआमाले उम्मत हाज़िरो नाज़िरन. This is the text I recited in Persian, Persian was the language then in the Indian subcontinent before Urdu. He mentions bachandi ikhtilafat wa kasrat mazahib, because even though there are different views about different things among the scholars, and there are a lot of madhabs and traditions, but because there is one issue that among the ulama there are different views about different things. Because there's one issue, one mas'ala, there is no khilaf in it. There is no dispute about it. And he's saying this 400 years ago. And what is he saying? कि Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam bahaqeeqat hayate besha'ibae majazo tawahhum ta'wil daim wa baqiyan. He goes, we know that Rasulullah is really haqiqatan, physically living. There is no metaphor, no majaz in this, and there is no way of deluding ourselves that these hadiths tell us he is alive. They could mean something else, they could mean something else. We can interpret these hadiths, make ta'wil in them, and give them a different meaning. He said, no, there was no disagreement on them. We make no ta'wil in the hadith. There is no wahm and delusion of ta'wil and interpreting the hadiths from their meanings. And he said there is complete agreement among the ulama, even though despite they disagree on other things, this is one issue they all agree on. This is one issue they all agree on. The second point he said, he said the second thing, in his grave he is alive, hayate hakikat. No majaz. His life is real, it's physical, it's not metaphorical. His life is not metaphorical. You can't say, well, it's not like real life, it's not physical, it's something else. It means, no, he says, no, there's agreement, bahayate hakikat. There is no doubt here that his life is physical and his life is real, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَبَرْ عَمَالِ أُمَّتْ حَازِرُوا نَاظِرًا. He said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in his grave, he is also witnessing the actions of his ummah. He sees our actions, and I'm going to go into that inshallah, explaining the hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in his grave, what is he doing? What are his duties? What is he doing? How is he occupied? I'm going to look at that inshallah. And one of the things Rasulullah is doing alive, he sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he is witnessing our books of deeds being presented to him sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He goes through our deeds sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which I will talk about inshallah. One other statement I want to mention, I'm talking about consensus now. Okay? Agreement of the ulama. The second thing I want to mention is Imam al-Zurqani in his commentary on al-Mawahib al-Dunya, he quoted Imam al-Subki in his tabaqat, who narrated from, who presented this view of Ibn al-Fawraq. He said, أنه عليه الصلاة والسلام حي في قبره على الحقيقة لا المجاز يصلي فيه بأذان وإقامة. Imam Zurqani, Sharh al-Mawahib al-Dunya, great Imam of Hadith and Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki, who is a great mujtahid Imam of his time, a massive Imam of his time, Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki, radiyallahu anhu. And you know who Taqiyuddin Subki? I just remembered something. Taqiyuddin Subki is that Imam Ibn Abidin said about him, Allama Shami, rahmatullah, he said, if all of the books of all four mazhabs, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, were ever destroyed, all of the mas'alas were ever destroyed from all law books, the evidences and all of the mas'alas also, there is one man who could rewrite all of the four madhabs. And that is Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki rahmatullah. He knew all four madhabs, he had such good grasp that he could rewrite all of the four madhabs again if all of the books were destroyed. This is how great Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki was in his time. He mentioned this, narrating from Ibn al-Fawraq, who was a great Imam. He said, the Prophet ﷺ is alive in his grave, and every Prophet is alive in his grave. Al-haqiqati lal-majazi, they are alive physically, really. It's not a metaphorical kind of life. And he said, يُصَلِّي بِأَذَانٍ وَإِقَامَةٍ. To surprise you, the Prophet ﷺ has adhan in his grave, he has iqamah in his grave, and he's praying salah inside his grave. sallallahu and he has adhan, and he has iqamah inside his grave, and he prays sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and this is physical. And these are some of the quotes that I mentioned to you from the scholars of hadith, and showing you this agreement among the scholars of hadith, even though now there are small sects that have their views, you see, and they try to confuse people. I'm showing you the hadith books, I'm showing you the views of the early ulama, you see, and I'm showing you this consensus in that. Let's go back a few steps, looking at what the ulama had to say, right? Not what John, Dick and Harry says on that road down there somewhere, on Green Lane. We're talking about history, we're talking about hadith literature, we're talking about ulama, we're talking about tradition and legacy, the view of the early Muslims. And I quoted Ibn al-Qayyim, I quoted Suyuti, I quoted Imam Muhammad bin Ja'far al-Qatani. Last week I quoted Imam Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, I quoted Imam Shamsuddin al-Sakhawi, I quoted some of the greatest imams of hadith for you last week. And this week now also, and I'm going to show you more inshallah. I showed you Ibn Darda, Abu Darda, I showed you Aus ibn Aus, I showed you Ibn Majah, Abu Dawood, all of them on this view. And relating to us this view that the prophets are alive in the graves. And Imam al-Qurtubi, I told you last week, I had his book last week, Al-Tadhkira, في أحوال الموتى وأمور الآخرة. Imam Qurtubi radiallahu anhu, rahimahullah anhu, he mentions in that book, The Reminder. It's a beautiful text. It incorporates all the details of what happens in the grave and what will happen in the hereafter. I had it with me last week. He mentions not only that the bodies of the prophets are saved, he said even al-adhan, al-mu'adhin al-muhtasib, the regular mu'adhin who gives azan, لا ينوت في قبره, he won't have insects entering his grave, and his body will not be decomposed. Even the mu'adhin who gives regular adhan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect his body. And Ibn Munda, great muhaddith, he has three separate pathways to this particular hadith through three separate sahaba, including Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The Prophet said, إِنَّ حَامِلَ الْقُرْآنِ الْعَامِلَ بِهِ لَا تَأْكُلُ الْأَرْضُ لَحْمَهُ. The Prophet said, the one who has memorized the Qur'an, the one who bears the Qur'an, look at the wording, the one who bears the Qur'an, the one who holds the Qur'an in his heart, and then acts according to it, the earth shall not eat its flesh, his flesh. There will be no decomposition for that person also. So if that is the state of a mu'adhin, and that is the state that Allah gives to a mu'adhin and also to a hafiz of the Qur'an, then what do you think the ranks of the prophets would be? Okay? And I want to mention two particular incidents. And this particular one I want to mention about Imam Muhammad bin Ja'far al-Qatani, who is a great qutub and wali and muhaddis of Syria. He traveled to also. He lived in Mecca and Medina also, where he taught for several years. And then he moved to Fez, where his family, the Qatani family, actually come from. And the Qatani family is a massive hadith family that for the last 200-300 years have a great tradition of hadith. If you say the word Qatani to a scholar of hadith, then you will see his reaction. The Qatani family is a massive hadith family. They had scholars of hadith in them. Muhammad bin Ja'far was from that family. He is the only scholar known in the history of Islam, and I'm going to make this very bold point. I heard this from my teachers in Syria. He's the only scholar in the history of Islamic civilization who taught the Musnad of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. Right? And this is perhaps the largest work we have at the moment. Bigger than Bukhari and Muslim. It's a massive work in several volumes. We have about 15 to 16 volumes of the Musnad of Ahmad. This Imam taught the Musnad of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal over 17 years in his life. He, from page to page, he would go through each hadith. He would go through the evidences of all four madhabs. Showing you this hadith, the Hanafis derive this hukm, this fiqh ruling, the Shafi'is derive this ruling, the Hanbalis derive this ruling, and so forth. He went through all four madhabs, analyzing them, giving all the views when Aqidah points. He went through all the Aqidah views, making his positions clear. He gave a full commentary of the Musnad of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal throughout his life. There is no other scholar of hadith known to do that in the history of Islam. No other scholar of hadith known to give a full recitation and commentary like the way he did. He's the only scholar in hadith who's noted to do that. Right? He's buried in Fez, and alhamdulillah, I visited his grave in Fez. I want to relate to you a story of when he passed away, radiallahu anhu. When he, radiallahu anhu, passed away around 1927. When he passed away, His family, they buried him in the Musalla Bab al-Futuh. If you ever visited Morocco, Bab al-Futuh is where you have the graves of all of the great awliya in Morocco, in Fez. If you ever visit Fez, it's only about an hour from the airport, if you ever intend to go. The old city of Fez. He was actually buried there. He passed away on the 16th of Ramadan. And he was buried in the Musalla Bab al-Futuh. Then a few months later, in Rabi' al-Thani, just a few months later, they had to transport his body from that grave to another place, Hawat al-Safah. That's where he's buried at the moment. That's where we visited him. He has a zawiya where he's buried at the moment, a specific area just for his noble grave. When they took him out, several months after they had buried him, when they took him out of his grave, he was still fresh. And they smelled the fragrance coming from his grave until they buried him. They say where we took him out from was fragrant. Every route we took him through remained fragrant. Where we buried him remained fragrant. And his body was still fresh, as if we had just buried him. This is how he was several months after he was buried. If this is what Allah gives to the ulama, the righteous ulama who follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, imagine how great the awliya, the anbiya and the rusul will be above that. I want to mention also the incident of Imam Sulaiman al-Jazuli, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, the great Imam of the Shadili tariqah, who was a student and murid of Shaykh Abu Abbas Mursi radiallahu anhu, who was a great Imam of the Shadili tariqah. He's the author of Dala'il al-Khairat. Dala'il al-Khairat is a book on salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's a book that only has different forms of reciting greetings to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You see? And this book, after the Quran, like the Buddha, it is the most recited book in the world. The Dala'il al-Khairat is the most recited book in the world after the Quran. Dala'il al-Khairat has been taken on in every tariqah, in the Sufi pathways, for example. They recite it as, when they greet the Prophet ﷺ, it's a part of their wird, the daily recitation, Dala'il al-Khairat. When Imam Jazuli passed away, and he was buried, 77 years after he was buried. 70? How many years? 77 years after they had to transport his grave from Sousse to Marrakesh in Morocco. They had to transport his grave. They took his body out of his grave. When they transported it, his body was still fresh. 77 years after. This is the blessing of reciting salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. Imam al-Nabhani mentioned this in Jami' al-Karamat al-Awliya. Shaykh Yusuf al-Nabhani, rahmatullah alayhi. He mentioned this particular incident with Imam al-Jazuli. When he was taken out of his grave, somebody actually pressed his cheek to see if there was any blood. And he saw blood gushing into his cheek. This is real examples that people have actually seen and witnessed. And this is a wali, this is a friend of Allah. Imagine the Anbiya, imagine the Messenger of Allah, the Imam of the Anbiya, who was the leader of the Anbiya sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imagine their states, what states they are in. So their blood is still fresh in their veins. Of the Anbiya, their blood is still fresh, and we said their life is real, it's haqiqah, it's not metaphorical, it's not majaz. And I mentioned Imam Suyuti and other scholars have written this, and they pray salah in their grave. And in Sahih Muslim, we have two narrations from the Prophet in Sahih Muslim. After Sahih Bukhari, we have Sahih Muslim as a second source of hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imam Muslim, rahmatullahi alayhi, mentions this, that the Prophet on the night of Mi'raj, when he was going to Bayt al-Muqaddas or Bayt al-Maqdis, رَأَيْتُ مُوسَى وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ يُصَلِّي فِي قَبْرِهِ. The Prophet saw Musa standing up in his grave praying salah. It's in Sahih Muslim. So Muslim is the student of Imam Bukhari. It's the second most authentic book in hadith after the Quran. You have Bukhari, then you have Muslim. These both narrations, the Prophet saying that I saw Musa standing in his grave on the night of the Isra, on the night journey, the night of ascent, when Rasulullah went to the heavens, when the Prophet was going to Palestine, on the way, at a place called Al-Kathib al-Ahmar, the Prophet saw saying that Musa standing in his grave praying salah. They were praying salah in their grave. And we have several narrations. We have about 45. How many? 45 narrations. How many? 45 separate chains separate chains to the Prophet ﷺ through separate people, through separate Sahaba, relating that the Prophet ﷺ met with the Anbiya on the night of Miraj, and that he ﷺ saw them praying Salah. We have 45 separate narrations, each one of them is separate from the other, telling us separate pathways or sources of information going back to the Prophet ﷺ, telling us that the Prophet ﷺ actually met with the Anbiya and so forth, and we talked about this last week also. Now, there was no, and I want to mention a few other things here now, and these are quite important. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, what was the Aqidah of the Sahaba? Let me tell you our Aqidah. This is the Aqidah of the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. Death, nobody escapes. Death comes to everybody. What is death? I said the separation of the soul from the body. Okay? Allah promised even the Prophet, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised in the Quran that the Prophets previously also died and the Prophet ﷺ will also die. We believe as Muslims the Prophet ﷺ did pass away. You see, his soul was taken from his body. That's when they gave his ghusl, put his shroud around him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's when they buried him. Okay? The Prophet did go through physical death. And death was what? Separation of the soul. We don't deny that. We don't deny that. That's one very clear point. It's part of our aqidah to believe, yes, the soul of the Prophet did leave his body. But what we believe is the soul of Rasulullah was then returned back into his body. And now he sallallahu is still alive. That's what we believe. So we don't deny that. We don't deny that. We believe he sallallahu passed away, but that his soul is inside of his body. And this was also the mentality of the Sahaba. It's amazing when Rasulullah sallallahu passed away. This is Imam At-Tirmidhi's Shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ, with Mullah Ali Qari's commentary and Imam Munawwar's commentary also, and the Shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ, and the characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ. And in this I'm going to mention the hadith. Look at this now. If somebody passes away, Zayd passes away, what do? What's the first thing? Okay, we need to arrange his janazah, right? We need to arrange his ghusl, his janazah, his shroud. We need to arrange his grave, take him to the cemetery, and then we need to bury him, right? This is what we think, right? The first thing we do when somebody passes away. But is that what the Sahaba done when Rasulullah passed away? You know what the Sahaba done? They went to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. If they, in their minds, thought Rasulullah is just like us, you know? He's passed away, so we just treat him the way we do everything normal, right? Just bury him also, shrine him also, put him away. Is that how they reacted to the demise of the Prophet? No! You know what they done? They never saw Rasulullah like themselves. Always knew he was greater in every form, in every aspect. You know what they said? They went, قالوا يا صاحب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنصلي على رسول الله. Oh, Abu Bakr, a companion of the Prophet, do we pray janazah over the Prophet? Allah Akbar. Yes, we do pray janazah over him. You understanding that? Like, is there a janazah for him? Because in their minds, Rasulullah is forgiven. There's no need for a janazah. He's maghfoor, he's ma'soom. Sayyid al-Ma'soomin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, among the human beings. So in their mentality, he's forgiven, right? Janazah is for the average believer. So they came up to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and nusalli alayhi. We can praise janazah? Do we have to praise janazah? Questions. Because they never saw him like themselves. He was always different. And this is a sound hadith by Imam At-Tirmidhi in his Sunnah. And they continue asking. And Imam Munawwar says, سألوه لتوهمي أنه مغفور له لا محالة فلا حاجة للدعاء. Imam Munawwar says in the commentary, why did they go to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and say, do we have to pray a janazah of the Prophet? He's passed away. Because they thought that, of course, Rasulullah is always forgiven. He has no sins. He's forgiven. He's ma'soom. He's sinless. And you only make dua for the sinful person. So do we need to do a janazah for him? So there's questions about his janazah. Do we do it or not? And then when Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq said, قال نعم, yes, the Prophet ﷺ, the rulings of the Sharia will apply to him also. There is janazah for everybody, and the Prophet ﷺ, there will be a janazah for also. So they said, كيف نصلي عليه? Okay, we have to do a janazah, but is it going to be like all the janazahs we do? Or is it going to be a different kind of janazah? Look at the mentality of the Sahaba, right? So, okay, then how are we going to do it? What is the kayfiyah, the manner in which we're going to do the janazah of the Prophet? Now, they don't know what to do. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu told them, and I'm going to particularly mention that. And what he said was that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, as Imam Hakim narrated in his Mustadrak and Barzakh also, the Prophet ﷺ gathered his family, according to his wasiyah, if this is a wasiyah, that the Prophet ﷺ said to his family, he said to his family, in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, فَمَنْ يُصَلِّي عَلَيْكَ, the family of the Prophet said, who's going to do your janazah or Rasulullah ﷺ? Who's going to pray over you when you pass away? And he said, إِذَا غَسَلْتُمُونِي وَكَفَنْتُمُونِي فَدَعُونِي عَلَى سَرِيرِي ثُمَّ اخْرُجُوا عَنِّي سَاعَةً فإن أول من يصلي جبريل ثم ميكائيل ثم إسرافيل ثم ملك الموت مع جنوده من الملائكة بأجمعهم ثم ادخلوا علي فوجا بعد فوج فصلوا علي وسلموا تسليما. The Prophet gathered his family according to the hadith of Mustadrak, and the Prophet said, when I pass away, then everybody leave my room, because first Jibreel will come pray janazah, then Israfil will pray janazah, then Malakul Maut will pray janazah, then once they have prayed my janazah, then you come in group by group, and there will be no imam among you. You will all stand alone in front of me, and you will say, As-salatu was-salamu alayka ya Rasulullah, that is my janazah. There was no congregation of janazah for the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because nobody felt worthy of standing in front of him and being the imam of Rasulullah. Nobody could become the imam of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They thought of him completely different. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Look at this, how they reacted to the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then they asked, okay then, after they asked about the janazah, look at this. They said, Ya sahib Rasulullah, ayudfanu Rasulullah? Okay, once they've prayed janazah, does he have to be buried? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. If they thought that he just passes away like everybody else and his death is just like everybody else, they wouldn't have raised these questions. But he is the beloved of Allah, the best of all creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So his janazah is even different. There's no imam leading the janazah. They came in group by group. The men came first, then the women came, then the children came. This is why it took 3 days. Before he was buried, passed away on Monday, buried on Wednesday, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because there was no jama'ah, and they all went into the house of Sayyidah Aisha where he was resting, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, Abu Bakr Siddiq, do we bury him? Does he have to be buried? And Imam Mullah Ali Qari makes a beautiful point in the commentary of this question. You know what they asked Abu Bakr Siddiq, do we bury him? Does he have to be buried? Is he going to be buried? And what did Mullah Ali Qari say in the commentary? He said, يعني أو يترك كذا على وجه الأرض لسلامته من العفونة والتغير فإن الأنبياء أحياء أو لانتظار الرفعة إلى السماء. Mullah Ali Qari radiallahu anhu said, the Sahaba had two aqidas. Either that we will leave the body of Rasulullah on earth, we will not bury him, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that He has protected the body of Rasulullah. This is why they asked this question. Or they thought that we're not going to bury him like we bury everybody else, because he is distinguished, because he is honorable, because he is the beloved of Allah. We will leave him on the earth and Allah will ask the angels to bring him up to the heavens. This is why the Sahaba were asking these questions about the body of the Prophet. And they differentiated clearly between themselves and Rasulullah, between their death and Rasulullah's, between their janazah and Rasulullah's, between their burial and Rasulullah's burial. And they asked all of these questions when he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed away. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq said, Na'am, yes, we will bury him. Because it is the sunnah of every Nabi that he be buried. It is the sunnah of every Nabi that he be buried. And this is some hadith I narrated to you. Again, we're running out of time. I want to move on, showing you how the Sahaba's mentality was in relation to the death of the Prophet from Shama'il of Imam al-Tirmidhi with its commentaries by Munawwar and Mullah Ali Qari. Now I want to come on to another aspect. If the Prophet is alive in his grave, two other points actually about him not being dead like the dead people, like a stone for example, him having life in his grave. Two other points. Point number one, the Prophet said, لا نورث ما تركنا صدقة. The prophets, نحن معشر الأنبياء. The prophets, whatever they leave behind, their inheritance, the Prophet said, we have no inheritance. Every wealth, every form of money or wealth or assets that we possess, after we leave, they are not distributed to the family, they are charity. The wealth of the prophets, the assets of the prophet is what? Is charity for people. Clearly, again marking the difference between the death of a normal person and the death of a prophet. When somebody dies, will gather to distribute the inheritance. The heirs will get together to talk about the assets, about the money and the wealth. The Prophet ﷺ said, no, the death of a Nabi is very different. What we leave behind is not wiratha, is not mirath, is not money to be given in inheritance, is not to be given to the heirs. What we have, this is why Sayyidah Fatima wasn't given the garden of Fidak, Bagh Fidak. Because the Prophet ﷺ said to Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, the possessions of the Prophet, they are not distributed in the family. That's the first point. Clearly, there's a difference between the death of the Prophet and ours. And the Sahaba saw that difference, and we also have to realize that. And the other point is, when a male passes away, a husband passes away, 4 months, 10 days later, the woman is free to marry. The iddah, the waiting period, 4 months, 10 days, that the wife is no longer a wife. That relationship of husband and wife, it ceases to exist. It finishes. They're no longer husband and wife in the Sharia. 4 months, 10 days down the lane, she's free to marry now, after she's gone through the iddah. That is with every other man. But with Rasulullah ﷺ, he's still married with his wives. And this is why it is haram for anyone, it was haram for anyone to marry any of the wives of Rasulullah ﷺ. No one was able to marry, it was haram, made haram for anyone to marry any of the wives of Rasulullah ﷺ. Why? Because he is a prophet of Allah, his death is different to our death. And that he is also living in his grave. His relation hasn't broken with his wives. You see, his hayat, his life in the grave is real. His relation with his wives hasn't finished. They are still his wives, and he is still their husband. This is why none of the Sahaba were allowed to marry any of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. So his death is different. His life is also different. What does the Prophet ﷺ do in the grave? And this I want to particularly mention. What if he is alive in his grave? What does he do? I want to mention some things. And I particularly want to refer you to my article, which is available on my website, scholarsinc.wordpress.com. scholarsinc.wordpress.com. It's my blog where I post my writings. I've written an article which was published also on Sacred Knowledge in the Mawlid season a couple of years ago. It's called Al-Bishara liman ahabba as-salama wa talaba az-ziyara. Glad tidings for those who affectionately greet the beloved Prophet and seek his prophetic vision. And I've mentioned two particular things here. I mentioned the first thing, Rasulullah ﷺ in his grave, he listens to our durood salam. Wherever we are, in the east and the west, I've given all the hadith evidences in this article in the English language. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ is alive in his grave, he listens to our durood salam. Whether we are in the east or the west, we are in Medina or out of Medina, wherever we are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Rasulullah the faculty and power to hear our durood salam. Hear our salatu salam and given the hadith evidences to that. And the second thing I've also established in this is Rasulullah replies to our durood salam with his lips. I've shown he physically replies to our durood salam. Now, the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, what does he do in his grave? The Prophet ﷺ said, Hayati khayrun lakum wa mamati khayrun lakum. Oh my Sahaba, my life is good for you. My life is good for you. You will relate about me, and my life will be related to you. My life is good for you. Wa mamati khayrun lakum. My death is also good for you. They thought, Ya Rasulullah, your life is good for us, but your death, how is your death good for us? And the Prophet ﷺ said, your actions will be presented to me. Your actions will be, your amal, your books of deeds, your annals will be presented to me. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if I see good deeds you have done in that day, then I will praise Allah. And if I see that any one of you has done sins, then I will ask for you. This is the job of Rasulullah in his grave. He is attending his ummah. He is attending the Zaireen of Medina. He is attending those who are standing at his blessed chamber. He is attending those, he is listening to the salam and the du'as of those who are standing in front of his Jali Mubarak. And those who are greeting him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, sitting in the east. And those in the west. And he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is receiving their greetings. And he's replying to all of them. And he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is also busy looking at our good deeds of our actions. The question is, how does he manage to do all of this? Doesn't he get distracted? There are thousands of people at one time reciting salawat to the Prophet, and he's listening to all of them at one time, and he's replying to all of them at one time. Imam Ahmad al-Khan in his book called Imba'ul Hayy, أن كلامه المسؤول بيان لكل شيء, he mentions, لا يشغله شهود عن شهود. There was a time in the Prophet ﷺ when he used to get distracted distracted by things. In his early stages, Allah was perfecting him. In his early stages, Rasulullah used to have attention to Allah, and then he used to have attention to people. Then came a time of perfection, where Rasulullah would attend Allah and the Ummah at one time. Nothing distracted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. لا يشغله شهود عن شهودين. There came a point where affairs did not distract him. He would be attentive to each and every affair at one time. At one time, Rasulullah would be paying attention to his za'ilin, to his visitors in Medina. He would be returning the salams of those people who are greeting him from the east and the west. He is also witnessing the a'mal of his ummah, looking at the actions of his ummah. This is a sound in Sahih Hadith narrated by Imam al-Barzakh on the authority of Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam looks at our a'mal. Look how beautiful, how rahim, and how beautiful the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. Look how beautiful he sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. If he sees sins that we've done, he asks for forgiveness. He says, Allah, forgive this servant of yours. Allah, forgive this ummati of mine. This is what the Prophet ﷺ is doing in his grave. And the Prophet actually physically returns the salam as well. And I want to relate this story to you. During the days of the occupation of Yazid, when Yazid brought his army and occupied Medina, these are known as Ayyamul Harra. The days of Harra, when Yazid occupied the territory of Medina with his army. And he forced all of the Sahaba to leave the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. The mosque of the Prophet ﷺ was locked off for several days. There was no adhan and iqamah and no Sahabi praying inside. And there was one Sahabi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Sa'id ibn Musayyib radiyallahu anhu. He says, I stayed inside the masjid of Rasulullah when Yazid forced everybody out. He pretended to be a madman, insane person. And they thought, leave him inside. They left Sa'id ibn Musayyib inside the masjid of Rasulullah because no Sahaba were praying for several days and there was no adhan and iqamah. Sa'id ibn Musayyib said, how did I know it's time for salah? I would hear a hum from the grave of Rasulullah. I would hear adhan and iqamah from the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that's how I knew it is time for salah. I used to pray my salah.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Ibrahim ibn Shayban said, I went to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ, and I said to the Prophet ﷺ, Assalamu alayka ya at the grave. And he said, I heard Rasulullah say to me, Wa alayka salam. I heard his reply from his grave. Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, one of the great awliya of Syria, he passed away about 10 years ago in Halab, Aleppo city, major scholar of hadith. The great ulama of Syria living today are his students. The great ulama of Syria, including Shaykh Nuruddin Itar, who is considered as a major hadith authority in Syria at the moment. The greatest hadith authority in Syria, Nuruddin Itar, is the son-in-law of the Shaykh. He's a student of the Shaykh, Abdullah Sirajuddin, rahimahullah. Abdullah Sirajuddin mentioned this in his book on the salawat of the Prophet ﷺ. He mentions these stories. This Syrian Shaykh mentions these incidents where people actually heard the salawat being returned to them from the Prophet ﷺ. And inshallah, we will inshallah conclude with this final statement. Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala, in the commentary of this hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ يَرَانِي فِي الْيَقَظَةِ مَنْ يَرَانِي فِي الْمَنَامِ فَسَيَرَانِي فِي الْيَقَظَةِ. Listen to this hadith carefully. The Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih al-Bukhari, whoever sees me in a dream will see me alive. And in the commentary of this, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani and other scholars, they said, what does this hadith mean? In Sahih Bukhari, whoever sees the Prophet ﷺ in their dream, they will not die except they meet Rasulullah awake. It means that the soul of Rasulullah is shown to them either at the time of death or either before that. If you have seen Rasulullah in your dream, you will see him before you pass away whilst awake. Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti mentioned 75 times he saw Rasulullah's soul come to him awake. Imam Suyuti, Jalaluddin Suyuti, the great muhaddith and mujaddid of the 9th century, scholar of hadith who memorized over 100,000 hadith, he said from Egypt, he said that I saw Rasulullah 75 times whilst awake. I asked him, Ya Rasulullah, is this hadith authentic or is it weak? I asked him about hadith authenticity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our attachment for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, increase our knowledge and keep us steadfast on Iman and Ihsan and on the way of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. I hope to finish with this, and I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this meeting a blessed and a forgiven meeting, inshallah, that we are forgiven when we leave this room. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.